You've heard of Stoicism, but do you really know the minds behind it? Not just quotes, not just ideas, but the lives of the warriors, kings, rebels, and slaves who lived and breathed Stoic wisdom. In this thrilling book summary of Lives of the Stoics, we're uncovering the untold stories of 10 powerful Stoic masters, from Zeno to Marcus Aurelius, and the surprising lessons they left behind. And here's the catch. These aren't boring lectures. These are real struggles, real choices, and real philosophies that can change the way you live, starting today. So don't skip. Grab your seat, open your mind. This is Book Summary Vault, and this is where the Stoics come alive. Chapter 1. The Birth of Stoicism, Zeno in the Founding Era. Before Stoicism became the guiding light for warriors, emperors, and everyday people like us, it began in silence. No fanfare, no crowds, just one man staring at the wreckage of everything he had built. That man was Zeno of Citium. He wasn't a philosopher. Not yet. He was a wealthy merchant sailing the seas, chasing prosperity, until one day his ship sank. All of it, gone. His wealth, his future, his identity. He found himself washed ashore in Athens, broke and alone. But destiny often hides behind disaster. One day, as he wandered the streets, he walked into a bookstore. He wasn't looking for answers, he was just lost. Inside, he picked up a scroll about Socrates, and that changed everything. Zeno became obsessed. He studied, listened, reflected, and slowly he stopped chasing money and started seeking meaning. Years later, he began teaching, not in a grand academy, but on a simple public porch in the city. The Stoa Poikile, a painted porch. That's where Stoicism gets its name. And that's where an entire philosophy was born. Zeno believed in one idea. Virtue is the only good. Not money, not fame, not pleasure, just wisdom, courage, justice, self-discipline. And if you mastered these, nothing could break you. Not a shipwreck, not failure, not even death. But Zeno was just the spark. Others came to keep the fire alive. One of his students was Cleanthes, a man of silence, strength, and unimaginable persistence. He was a boxer once. He didn't have money for classes. So he carried water during the day, heavy jars on his back, just to earn enough to study at night. People mocked him. They called him slow, simple, even dull. But they never saw what made him powerful, his ability to endure. His deep connection to nature, to duty, to the divine order of the universe. He believed everything happened for a reason, and our job wasn't to resist life, but to align with it. Cleanthes didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. And when Zeno passed, Cleanthes quietly took his place, not because he was the most brilliant, but because he lived what Stoicism preached. Resilience, humility, purpose. And then came the man who would give Stoicism its backbone, Chrysippus. He wasn't charming, he didn't seek attention, but he had one superpower. He wrote. And wrote, and wrote. Over 700 books. He took Zeno's values, Cleanthes' calm, and built a full system. Logic, ethics, physics. A fortress of thought that would last for centuries. If Zeno started Stoicism and Cleanthes protected it, Chrysippus structured it. He made it bulletproof. So think about this. Stoicism wasn't born in palaces. It was born through pain, loss, endurance, and relentless pursuit of virtue. Zeno lost everything and built something eternal. Cleanthes was mocked and became a master. Chrysippus stayed in the shadows and gave the world a philosophy that still holds power today. And this is just the beginning. Stick around, because in the next chapter, Stoicism leaves the porch and walks straight into the heart of Rome. Chapter 2, Spreading the Flame. The Middle Stoic. The flame of Stoicism was lit in Greece, but to survive, it had to travel. It had to evolve. And so it began to move west, slowly, steadily, from the streets of Athens to the rising heart of an empire, Rome. But before Stoicism could reach kings and emperors, it needed messengers, translators, reformers. The bridge between Zeno's quiet porch and Rome's roaring Senate would be built by three thinkers, Antipater, Palladius, and Posidonius. These were the Middle Stoics, the connectors. The ones who didn't just protect Stoic thought, but reshaped it for a changing world. Antipater came first. He was a student of Diogenes of Babylon, and later became the head of the Stoic school in Athens. While history doesn't give us all the details of his life, what we know is clear: he was a man of precision. He took the early Stoic teachings and pushed them further, refining ideas of duty, moral responsibility, and logical clarity. He believed Stoicism wasn't just for personal growth. It had social responsibility. A Stoic wasn't just a thinker. A Stoic had to serve, to act, to be a part of the greater good. That idea would become the soul of Stoicism in Rome. Then came Palladius, a game changer. He was elegant, diplomatic, persuasive, and very different from the silent Cleanthes or the obsessive Chrysippus. Palladius was the first Stoic to make philosophy fashionable among the Roman elite. He didn't yell or preach. He taught calmly, even charmingly, and he believed that Stoicism needed to be updated for practical life. He softened the edges of early Stoicism. He argued that emotions weren't always enemies, that wealth, if used wisely, wasn't evil, that Stoicism could live in the heart of government, in the hands of senators, generals, and even rulers. He traveled to Rome, became friends with Scipio Aemilianus, one of Rome's greatest generals, and planted seeds that would one day grow into a Stoic emperor. Palladius proved that Stoicism wasn't stuck in scrolls. It could walk into war rooms, courts, political chambers, and still stand tall. And then came the mind that would stretch Stoicism to the stars, Posidonius. He wasn't just a philosopher. He was a scientist, a historian, a geographer, a thinker who believed that philosophy should explain the entire universe. Where Chrysippus gave Stoicism its logic, Posidonius gave it imagination. He tried to measure the oceans, map the heavens, and track the rise and fall of civilizations. To him, Stoicism wasn't just a moral guide, it was the language of the cosmos. He taught that understanding nature, science, and history wasn't separate from virtue, it was a part of it. And yet, even with his massive intellect, he never forgot what Stoicism was really about: self-control, discipline, and understanding the role of fate. Together, these three Middle Stoics carried the torch across generations, through war, travel, politics, and science. They modernized the message, they expanded the vision. They proved that Stoicism wasn't just Greek wisdom, it was human wisdom. They didn't shout, they didn't conquer. They simply shared ideas that made even the most powerful men in Rome stop, think, and change. Thanks to them, Stoicism wasn't just surviving anymore. It was spreading into schools, armies, and senate halls. The flame was no longer flickering. It was rising, and that flame would soon land in the hands of a man who would stand against tyranny, who would challenge an empire itself in the name of virtue. Don't go anywhere. The next chapter brings you face to face with Rome's greatest rebel, Cato. Chapter 3: Stoicism meets Rome, Cicero and the statesman. By now, Stoicism had crossed the sea. It began on a quiet Greek porch, but now it stood before the roaring heart of an empire. Rome, an empire built on ambition, blood, and glory. But in the midst of power and politics came a man who saw something deeper. A man who wasn't a Stoic, but understood its value better than most Stoics ever could. His name was Cicero. Marcus Tullius Cicero, lawyer, orator, philosopher, and one of Rome's most powerful voices. He wasn't just intelligent, he was electric. His words could change minds, shift policies, and silence entire crowds. He believed in the Republic, in law, in virtue. And he believed in philosophy, not just as theory, but as a tool for life. Cicero studied all schools of thought, Epicureanism, academic skepticism, but Stoicism? Stoicism gave him a weapon for duty, a shield for hardship, a compass for justice. He didn't call himself a Stoic, but he translated Stoic ideas into something every Roman could understand. Cicero believed that wisdom and virtue weren't just private matters, they were public responsibilities. That philosophy didn't belong in bookshelves, it belonged in the Senate, in courtrooms, in battlefields. To Cicero, the Stoic idea of virtue wasn't passive, it was active. Speak truth, serve your people, sacrifice comfort for the good of the state. He wasn't perfect. He made political enemies, switched sides, took risks. But through it all, his anchor was philosophy. In his famous writings like On Duties, On the Republic, and On the Laws, you'll find Stoic fingerprints everywhere. He wrote that justice is not a human invention, but a universal law. He said that the greatest glory was not in personal success, but in serving others with honor. In a time when Rome was crumbling from corruption, violence, and betrayal, Cicero tried to hold it together with words, with reason, with virtue. And it cost him everything. When Julius Caesar took power, Cicero resisted. When Caesar fell, Cicero spoke out again, this time against Mark Antony. That speech sealed his fate. Cicero was declared an enemy of the state. Soldiers came for him. He didn't beg, he didn't hide. He faced death like a Stoic, calm, composed, prepared. As they struck him down, he stretched out his neck willingly. Even in his final breath, he remained what he had always been, a servant of the Republic and a student of wisdom. Cicero may not have worn the Stoic badge, but his life was the perfect bridge. He took the teachings of Greece and planted them deep in the soil of Rome. He proved that Stoicism wasn't just about silence or retreat. It could guide leaders, shape laws, and protect the soul of a nation. Because sometimes the most powerful form of resistance is staying true to your principles, no matter the cost. Stay with us, because next we meet the man who lived Stoicism louder than anyone before him. A warrior, a rebel, a living symbol of Roman virtue. His name was Cato. Chapter 4. The Stoic Rebel, Cato the Younger. Imagine a man so committed to his principles that he would rather die than compromise them. That man was Cato the Younger, a Roman senator, a rebel, and a Stoic warrior of integrity whose story still echoes through history. Cato wasn't just a philosopher sitting in his study, quoting ideas about virtue and discipline. No, Cato lived Stoicism. Every word he spoke, every decision he made, even when facing death, was fueled by an unshakable moral compass. He stood tall against the mighty Julius Caesar, not because he wanted power, but because he feared what the loss of Roman liberty would mean. While others bent the knee or played politics, Cato refused to yield. He chose honesty over popularity. He chose principle over survival. Even his enemies feared his conviction. His lifestyle was minimalist. He wore plain clothing, ate simple food, and never indulged in luxuries, even when he could. To Cato, comfort was a distraction, pleasure a trap. His life was a daily battle to discipline the self, to remain free from corruption, to remain stoic. And when Rome fell into Caesar's hands and all hope seemed lost, Cato didn't run. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't compromise. Instead, he took his own life, not out of despair, but to show that freedom was more precious than breath itself. This is what makes Cato not just a character in history, but a legend. A living, breathing symbol of what it means to stay true when the world begs you to bend. If you want to know how unbreakable inner strength looks, look no further than Cato the Younger. Chapter 5. Stoicism. Seneca, the philosopher-politician. Picture this. A man who lived in a palace but preached detachment. A man who held immense political power but warned against the temptations of ambition. This was Seneca the Younger, a Roman philosopher who lived a life of luxury while writing about simplicity. A life of influence while teaching restraint. Seneca's life was full of contradictions, and yet that's what makes him so real, so relatable, and so vital to understanding Stoicism in the real world. He wasn't a monk on a mountain. He was right there, in the middle of the Roman Empire's brutal political chaos, advising one of the most dangerous emperors in history, Nero. Imagine trying to be a stoic voice of reason while sitting next to a tyrant whose whims could decide life or death. That was Seneca's world. Many criticize Seneca for his wealth and power. How can a Stoic be rich, they ask? But that's the beauty of his story. Seneca knew the pull of desire, the allure of comfort, the pain of hypocrisy, and he fought through it. He didn't pretend to be perfect. He wrote with honesty, admitting his inner battles. And that's why his words still strike deep. Because like all of us, Seneca was torn between the life he lived and the life he knew was right. Through his letters and essays, he taught us that true wealth is not gold or property, but the ability to govern your emotions, control your time, and master your thoughts. He reminded us that even when surrounded by madness, we can choose calm, we can choose reason, we can choose stillness. In the end, Nero turned on him. And Seneca met his death as he lived his life, with composure. He opened his veins and calmly accepted his fate, proving that his Stoic ideals weren't just words, they were the core of his being. Seneca shows us that Stoicism isn't about being perfect. It's about striving, every single day, to be just a little more in control, a little more virtuous, a little more free. Chapter 6. The Teacher of Resilience. Musonius Rufus. He wasn't a general. He wasn't a statesman. He didn't lead armies or sit in marble halls. But his power was unshakable. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who believed that philosophy wasn't just for the classroom, it was for life. He taught not with swords, but with principles, not with force, but with clarity. In an age when power meant domination, Musonius quietly redefined power as self-discipline, reason, and virtue. Exiled more than once, banished from Rome for his unwavering beliefs, Musonius never broke, because his philosophy wasn't just theory, it was training. Every hardship, every injustice was a lesson, a test, an opportunity to become stronger. He believed that the purpose of philosophy was not to sound wise, but to live wisely. For him, Stoicism wasn't meant to stay in books. It belonged in the home, in the market, in the heart of daily struggle. He taught his students to wake early, eat simply, endure pain, speak truth, and respect others, especially women. Yes, Musonius was ahead of his time. He spoke boldly about gender equality, insisting that women, too, must be educated in philosophy. Because virtue, he said, has no gender. Courage has no gender. Wisdom has no gender. And what did he say about wealth, fame, power? None of it matters, he taught. The true wealth is to need less. The true power is to master yourself. His words shaped the mind of one of history's most powerful Stoics, Epictetus, his student. But even beyond that, Musonius's life is a reminder that resilience isn't built in grand speeches, but in small daily decisions. To rise early, to act justly, to endure hardship without complaint, to live not for comfort, but for character. Musonius Rufus lived quietly, but he taught loudly, and his echo still speaks. In the face of hardship, train your mind. In the face of chaos, hold your ground. And in the face of ease, choose the harder path. Chapter 7. The Slave Who Became a Master, Epictetus. He was born into chains. Not metaphorically, literally. Epictetus entered this world as a slave, beaten, silenced, controlled, but his spirit, it was never owned. Where most would see a life of despair, he saw a battlefield for the soul. Epictetus had nothing, no wealth, no freedom, no title, but he discovered the one thing no master could take, his mind. And so, from the silence of slavery, he learned the language of resilience. In the freezing shadows of hardship, he forged the fire of wisdom. Because Epictetus realized what many free men never do, that real chains are not on the body, but on the soul. And true freedom, it begins inside. He taught, you cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond. This wasn't a theory to him. It was survival. He lived through pain, humiliation, rejection, yet emerged not bitter, but brilliant. Eventually freed, Epictetus didn't chase riches or revenge. He chose to teach, not in fancy robes, not behind palaces, but in a simple school in Nicopolis where future emperors came to learn. One of them was Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus never wrote down his words. His student Arrian did. And what survives today is not just philosophy, it's a manual for life. He taught us to ask only one thing: what is in my control? And what is not? If it's not in your control, let it go. If it is, master it. He taught that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. That fortune is unstable, but character is unshakable. That the world may break your body, but only you can give up your dignity. Epictetus didn't just rise from slavery, he transcended it. He proved that freedom is not a gift of birth, it's the reward of inner discipline. Even today, when life gets loud and messy and painful, we can still hear his voice. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Born a slave, died a master, a man who had nothing, but gave the world everything. Chapter 8. The Philosopher King. Marcus Aurelius. What happens when the most powerful man in the world refuses to be ruled by power? Marcus Aurelius wasn't just a Roman emperor. He was the emperor, the most powerful man on earth, commanding armies, shaping laws, holding the fate of millions in his hands. Yet while others wore their crowns with pride, Marcus wore his with humility. While others sought glory, Marcus sought truth. While others indulged in pleasure, Marcus practiced discipline. Behind the golden throne and marble halls was a man who rose before dawn, not to conquer nations, but to conquer himself. Because Marcus knew, the hardest empire to rule is the one within. He was surrounded by flattery, betrayal, war, disease. He lost children, faced constant rebellion. Yet in the darkest storms of life, he turned inward and wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Those words, scribbled in a personal journal never meant for the world, would become the heart of Meditations, the most powerful book ever written on Stoic philosophy. He reminded himself daily, you are mortal. You control your actions, not your outcomes. Be just, be brave, be kind. He lived these words not in peace, but in pressure. While commanding soldiers in freezing frontiers, he wrote about gratitude. While dealing with traitors and plagues, he reflected on compassion. While carrying the crushing weight of Rome, he reminded himself, the obstacle is the way. Marcus could have lived in decadence, but he chose discipline. He could have silenced his critics, but he chose tolerance. He could have claimed divine status, but he chose to remain human. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be, he said. Be one. He didn't write meditations to impress anyone. He wrote it to remind himself how to stay upright when the world tilts sideways. And that is the power of Marcus Aurelius. Not that he was flawless, but that he was aware, constantly correcting, constantly refining, constantly returning to virtue. He proved that true greatness isn't loud. It's steady. That strength isn't domination. It's restraint. That legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's how you live while you're here. The philosopher King taught us that no matter how high you rise, your character must rise higher. He ruled the world, but never let the world rule him. Chapter 9. Unsung Heroes of Stoicism, Lesser-Known Stoics. In a world obsessed with fame, some heroes chose virtue over visibility. They never sought the spotlight, never commanded empires, never wrote best-selling scrolls. But their lives, their choices, their unshakable courage, lit the path for giants. These are the unsung heroes of Stoicism. Start with Junius Rusticus. He wasn't a conqueror, he wasn't a king, but he mentored one. Marcus Aurelius credited him with shaping his mind, teaching him to love philosophy, not as a theory, but as a way of living. Rusticus gave Marcus the writings of Epictetus, but more than that, he gave him example. Rusticus didn't speak often, because he didn't need to. His character spoke louder than words. In a corrupt court, he chose honesty. In a world of vanity, he chose stillness. He lived simply, judged fairly, walked gently. Rusticus was the bridge between wisdom and power, and he crossed it in silence. Then there was Agrippinus. History barely whispers his name, but his life roars with moral courage. In Nero's blood-soaked empire, Agrippinus stood alone, calm, upright, unafraid. When the emperor demanded conformity, Agrippinus refused to bow. Not out of arrogance, but principle. Someone once asked him, "Don't you care what people think?" He replied, "I do care, but I care more about doing what's right." When exile came, he didn't complain. When threats came, he didn't flinch. When death came, he met it with dignity. He understood. You cannot control fate, but you can choose to meet it with honor. And what about Epictetus, a Roman senator who defied tyranny, not with violence, but with virtue? When Nero's madness infected Rome, Thrasea became a quiet rebel. He walked out of the Senate, refused to flatter the emperor, spoke the truth when it was dangerous to even whisper it. Eventually, Nero ordered his death. But Thrasea didn't beg, didn't flee, didn't curse the heavens. He opened his veins calmly, like Socrates drank the hemlock. Because to a Stoic, how you die is the final proof of how you lived. These men weren't celebrated, they weren't glorified, they were forgotten by history, but remembered by philosophy. They remind us, you don't need a throne to be powerful. You don't need fame to leave a legacy. You don't need wealth to live richly. They lived in shadows, but stood in truth. They were tested by emperors, but answered only to conscience. Their stories may never be turned into statues, but in the silent moments when you ask, what is the right thing to do? Their spirit answers. Stoicism is not just for the philosophers or the kings. It belongs to the bold, the quiet, the unshakable few who choose what is right, not what is rewarded. And in a world chasing noise, these forgotten Stoics became echoes of true strength, not by being seen, but by seeing clearly. Chapter 10. The Legacy Lives On. Stoicism in the Modern World. Imagine this, a leader facing chaos, a crisis that could destroy nations. But instead of panicking, instead of seeking shortcuts or temporary relief, this leader stands firm, steady, and focused. That leader is shaped by the wisdom of Stoicism. Hundreds of years have passed since the days of Zeno and Marcus Aurelius, but Stoicism hasn't just survived, it has thrived. Stoic principles continue to shape leaders in every field, from CEOs to military generals, from athletes to political figures. The core teachings of Stoicism transcend time and place because they speak to something universal, the power of the mind to shape the life you live. Stoicism is not a set of beliefs to be memorized. It's a tool to build resilience, focus, and clarity. And in a world more distracted and uncertain than ever before, this tool has never been more relevant. Consider the Stoic idea of control. In a time when external events seem beyond our grasp, Stoicism reminds us that we can always control one thing: how we respond. In the face of adversity, we have the power to choose our attitude, our actions, and our purpose. This lesson is vital for leadership today. Great leaders aren't defined by their circumstances. They're defined by their response to them. From Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook to Naval Ravikant and Ryan Holiday, Stoic ideas are echoed in the way these modern leaders navigate chaos, manage failure, and persist in the pursuit of their missions. But Stoicism isn't just for leaders of companies or nations. It's for all of us. Stoicism teaches us that the only true power we have is over ourselves, that we don't need to change the world to change our lives. We need only to change our perception, our habits, our mindset. In sports, athletes like Michael Phelps, Tom Brady, and LeBron James openly talk about Stoic principles shaping their mindset. They embrace discipline, focus on what's in their control, and ignore distractions, all Stoic tenets. When the pressure is highest, they don't bend, they don't break. They stay true to their training, their purpose, and their inner strength. Even in the chaos of modern life, Stoicism offers peace. When the news is full of anxiety, when social media pulls us into comparison, when personal struggles feel overwhelming, Stoicism calls us to pause, breathe, and center ourselves. It tells us, you don't control the storm, but you control your ship. In a world that feels increasingly out of control, the Stoics' call to accept what we cannot change and master what we can is the ultimate source of inner power. But it's not just about surviving. Stoicism is about thriving, with courage, virtue, and purpose. It's about living with meaning, not in a world of distractions, but in a life of intention. Whether we're leading a nation, running a business, raising children, or simply walking through daily life, the Stoic way offers us a blueprint for clarity and resilience. And so, the legacy of Stoicism lives on. It is a legacy built not on power, wealth, or fame, but on the ability to rise above our circumstances. It's a legacy of character. It's a legacy of truth. When we practice Stoicism, we step into the power that these ancient teachers, Zeno, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and others, left for us. It's a power that transcends centuries. A power that continues to guide us, inspire us, and remind us that no matter what life throws at us, we always have the power to choose our response. And that is the truest form of freedom. In a world full of chaos, the ancient wisdom of Stoicism gives us calm. From Zeno to Marcus Aurelius, their stories aren't just history. They're a guide to mastering your mind, building character, and facing life head-on. If this journey inspired you, imagine what's next. Like what you saw? Then don't just scroll. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more life-changing book summaries and timeless wisdom, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a drop of Stoic truth. Let's build a powerful mind, one video at a time.